Ashley Litwin, registered dietitian nutritionist. Welcome to our second episode with the Dietitian Who Doesn't Diet. Today I want to go into busting through a couple myths of what to and to not eat. I know we are constantly being bombarded with foods to not eat. I know that wherever we look, whether it's on a magazine or a billboard or a commercial, it's saying, don't eat this, you know? One week it's don't eat this, the next week it's don't eat that, and then it's don't eat this. One time you're having salmon, the next week you're not having salmon. One time you're having eggs, the next week you're not having eggs. It is so confusing. It's even confusing for me as a dietitian. I have spent many years trying to understand why we have so many confusing messages on our media and how it influences us. So what I want to get back to is really talking about what can you eat? What should we be eating? And how can we have that in an everyday eating style? So first and foremost, I do not believe in good and bad foods. Once we start classifying foods as good and bad, we're placing a lot of power on them. Say for instance, I have a donut one morning and I say that donut is so bad. Therefore, I'm a bad person because I had that donut. Now, is that guilt and shame going to ultimately lead me to running back to my house and isolating for the rest of the day, or maybe even binging even more throughout the rest of the day? I don't know, but when we put that power onto the foods, it makes us adjust our behaviors and typically makes us have maladaptive behaviors that aren't actually healthy for our mind or our body. So if we get rid of moralizing foods, getting rid of saying this is good and this is bad, and just saying, you know what, it's just food, we can build a lot more peace with food. We can develop a different relationship to food and ultimately develop a different relationship to your body. Now, every single food is made up of nutrients. There are calories in all foods that we eat. You know, oftentimes when I ask the question, what is the first thing that you think of when you hear the word calories? A lot of people will say, oh God, gross, you know, disgusting, shameful, we need to eat as low calories as possible. And there's a lot of things that immediately come up for us when we hear that word. And the thing is, all food is made up of calories. All food. And a human being needs calories to survive. That is how we derive our energy source. That is the primary fuel source for the brain, period. So when we're cutting out calories and we're getting too restrictive with our calorie intake, it can wreak havoc on the body and the brain. We won't be able to function properly. We won't be able to exercise, be active, work efficiently throughout the day because we'll be foggy, we'll be tired, we'll be fatigued. I know if anyone has tried a diet before where you're restricting calories, 9 times out of 10, you're probably feeling those symptoms. So let's just throw that on the table. Calories are not bad. We have to get away from saying that calories are bad because honestly, all foods, whether it's kale, apples, salmon, donuts, ice cream, lemons, it doesn't matter. They're all made out of calories. And it's how to adequately nourish yourself with an appropriate calorie intake for each individual person. That is what we should be striving for, not telling ourselves that we need to eat as little as possible, as low as possible, or as minuscule as possible. A really great client that I worked with a few years ago, he came to me and he had been diagnosed with binge eating disorder, and he said to me, Ash, I just have to eat as little as possible, as little as possible, as little as possible. And I said, that's where you're wrong. That's where you're wrong. You need to eat enough, you need to eat enough, you need to eat enough. It's not about eating as little as possible, it's about adequately eating. So all calories are broken up into macronutrients. Those macronutrients are protein, carbohydrates, and fat. Now, in the 90s, we lived in an anti-fat world, right? We had low-fat everything. We had non-fat yogurt, and we had snack wells with zero fat in it, and we had zero-fat dressings, and throwing the yolks out of eggs, and we were ultimately fearful of fat, and we thought that fat was destroying the health of all Americans. And one of the most interesting studies that I've been able to see was the Framingham Heart Study that started in the 90s, and it actually took a really, really large population size and it put them on low-fat diets, and it tracked them over a 20-year period. After that 20-year period, we found ourselves with higher incidences of heart disease, higher incidences of obesity, and other obesity-related illnesses in our country. So researchers were like, whoopsie daisies, it wasn't the fat. And it seems like every decade we demonize a different nutrient. In the 90s, Time magazine released this issue that had 2 eggs with a yolk in them and a sad face of bacon. 2015 rolled around and Time released a new article, a new issue that had 2 eggs on it and a smiley face with the bacon. So you can see right there how confusing consumers are. We're saying, wait, not too long ago we were supposed to not stay away from this. We were supposed to definitely not consume it. Then all of a sudden it's good for us? Okay. Now in 2017, for the past few years we've been absolutely demonizing carbohydrates. We've been demonizing sugar, and we are getting very confusing messages as to how to eat carbohydrates in the day. A lot of people I know are not eating very many carbohydrates at all and ultimately trying to stay away from all forms of sugar. Now, sugar is naturally occurring in many of our foods that we eat. Sugar naturally occurs in yogurt, sugar naturally occurs in fruit and in some vegetables, in starches, the things that give us energy, the things that give us antioxidants, fiber, water, nutrients. The list goes on. So when we're consistently demonizing a nutrient, we have to really ask ourselves, does it need to be demonized, or do we need to just rediscover how to have a relationship to that food, how to adequately balance those foods so we can have a wide variety of foods across the board? I like to work with 6 different food groups. So we work with proteins, we work with carbohydrates, which are typically starches or grains. We work with vegetables, we work with fruits, we work with dairy, and we work with fats. Now, all of those food groups have a different amount of macronutrients in them. So for instance, take dairy. You know, if I was to drink milk or if I was to have yogurt, that is a very balanced food in nature. That has protein, that has naturally occurring sugar, we would consider the carbohydrates, and it also has fat in it. So if you think about it, when the manufacturers were stripping away all of the fat in the dairy source, they were taking away 1/3 of its nutrient value. Now, fat is a really beautiful nutrient, and it's one of the nutrients I like to start with because for so long I personally thought that fat was my foe. And now I'm here to say that fat is your friend. Fat is a very dense nutrient. It is, we know that. It's what provides a nice mouthfeel when you're eating things. It's what provides you with satiety, and satiety is the satisfaction and pleasure that you feel after a meal. It provides you with fullness. It helps you to feel full and satisfied after the meal, which carries you to the next snack or to the next meal. On a deeper level, it also helps regulate hormones, and it is adequate for human life. It is necessary, and we're even finding it's very beneficial in times of if people have been in accidents or any traumatic injuries. Fat can be very, very beneficial. So fat is your friend, not your foe. Now we have protein. Protein is amazing, and I don't think protein has ever really been demonized per se, but there was a period of time when many, many people were succumbing to low protein, high carb diets. I mean, you can see over the years that many different diets have been popular and have been fads, and it changes all of the time. And ultimately, that's why I want to encourage you to get away from the dieting messages and to get back to adequate nourishment, to get back to listening to when you're hungry and when you're full. For instance, if you were cutting fat out of your diet and you were feeling like you were starving throughout the day, and by the time 8 or 9 p.m. rolls around, you're overeating and you're binging and you're feeling out of control and chaotic, that's really time to look at how can you adequately incorporate fat throughout the day so you're not feeling that state of deprivation that's sparking that binge at the end of the day. So back to protein. Protein is a beautiful building block for your entire body. Protein makes up your hair, skin, and nails. Protein makes up your organs. Protein makes up many tissues in your body. Protein also makes up beautiful neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin that circulate in our brain and ultimately give us the natural pleasure feelings, natural highs that we feel throughout our day. Without adequate protein, we won't be able to have that. We won't be able to feel those things naturally as your body wants you to. So you're getting away from a normal physiological state. Last but not least are our carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are incredibly important for energy production, fuel, prevention of chronic disease, prevention of cancers. They can be very, very useful and very beneficial to the body. Now, just like I mentioned, the neurotransmitters that are built off of protein building blocks, you actually need carbohydrates to package those building blocks so your brain can utilize those neurotransmitters. Without that system, you won't be able to effectively use those things in your body or your brain. Carbohydrates are found in all sorts of things. Carbohydrates, again, are naturally occurring sugars found in dairy or fruit, but they can be whole grains like wheat. They can be barley or rye or starchy vegetables like potatoes or sweet potatoes. And they're extremely, extremely important to have periodically through the day. I would say at every single meal and some snacks, because you need to give yourself that infusion of energy, that foundation, and really laying a great framework for nourishment throughout the day. So all in all, I want to get away from demonizing one nutrient, demonizing one food group. If someone's telling you to cut out a whole food group, I'm going to tell you, run in the opposite direction. You want to adequately use these things throughout your day. You don't want to fear them. The goal is to make peace with food, to make peace with your body, and live a nourished life.